Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends. If you're watching this video, then the latest patch has just been announced and released for public consumption. I wanted to focus and dedicate this video to the 2 character reworks that have just arrived this patch, starting with something that I've been talking about for a very long time. Everything in this video is timestamped as usual, and this video release also dovetails nicely with the 8,000 subscriber milestone for my channel, so I have a nice free community code for you all. You all know how much I love Tao, so I'm going to do quite a deep dive on Shadowsun and explain everything I think you need to know about the changes. Her movement increases from 3 to 4, and her ranged weapon type, Melta, is buffed from 70 to 75% pierce. It also gives the character 50% bonus damage to vehicles. We see significant changes to her command link drone as well. It is made more survivable with a boost to health and armor, but I think crucially they have removed the movement stat from the drone. It is now stationary and therefore much easier to predict and position around. They've also given the command link drone an effect range of 2, but Shadowsun herself still has an effect range of 1. The final thing is that her passive ability gives an extra 20% hit chance per turn to ranged Tau units, up from 10% per turn previously. We'll start by looking at her passive, Defender of the Greater Good. There are 2 parts of this passive. One gives a damage bonus aura of 500 at max level, and the other gives Tau units a bonus chance to hit at range. In this video clip, you'll see that Shadowsun doesn't automatically apply Defender of the Greater Good to herself. Characters affected by the command link drone buff have this small green buff icon underneath their portrait, indicating that they are affected. As we cycle into turn 2, that 20% chance has gone up to 40%. Once we summon her command link drone, you can see that she now gains the benefit of Defender of the Greater Good, even at range 2. A small error in this test build is that the command link drone buff is applying the wrong damage bonus. The drone should provide the same bonus as Shadowsun, and this will be fixed by the time the game is updated. As Sho moves forward, we can see that Shadowsun herself only provides the bonus at range 1, and therefore Sho loses the Defender of the Greater Good bonus effect. We can cycle through several turns here just to demonstrate that this ability does indeed cap out at 100% and no higher. The final thing to demonstrate is that when the drone and Shadowsun are both adjacent to the same target, the effects do not stack, so you can only be affected by this aura once. What about her passive itself and how it fits into the game? You can see that when comparing the first part of Shadowsun's damage buff to other meta characters, she is on the weaker side. She only applies her damage bonus to ranged units, and the raw numbers aren't as impressive as Eldryon or Calgar. So if you're looking to bring her into battle simply on the basis of her damage buff, I think you'll find better options out there. So what about the next part of her passive, which gives a bonus hit chance to ranged Tau characters? The only current ranged Tower characters in the game are Sho, Rayvas, Darkstrider, Shadowsun herself, and Sho's sniper drones. The numbers shown on screen are at Diamond 3 or level 50 in the case of the sniper drone. For the sake of math, let's give the enemy a target armor of 2400, which is what a Legendary 5 guild boss roughly has after you've defeated the primes. You can see straight away that we are not interested in Rayvas. The raw damage is pretty low, and we're not interested in adding a single hit for her. As a refresher on how damage is dealt, Damvar is the greater of either damage minus armor or damage multiplied by pierce ratio. When we apply those principles to the Tau units from earlier, we can see that Sho easily does the most damage. Shadowsun and the sniper drone are fairly middling, and Darkstrider isn't that impressive. Okay, so having discounted Rayvas and Darkstrider, we can say that Shadowsun likes Sho and vice versa. The 2 pair nicely together, and from a guild raid perspective, we want to find situations where Sho is useful in order to bring Shadowsun along to those same bosses. I've gone for a fairly brutish system here of meh, no, or potential. Sho is fine against the old Tyranid bosses and Sarek, but as you'll see in this gameplay clip, the drones can easily become distracted by the summons, which can make positioning difficult and cause you to lose damage potential when the drones hit non-boss targets. Ghazghkull, Mortarion, and Rogal Dorn all have their own anti-summon mechanics, either in the form of large-scale area of effect attacks, or in Ghazghkull's case, summoning more Storm Boys based on the number of summons you have on the battlefield. I think Shadowsun and Sho are going to be best against the Screamer Killer, because after you've killed the initial summons, the fight becomes a bit of movement and artistry, provided you meet the minimum gear thresholds. This is a lengthy clip where I used the 2 Tau with 2 Admechs, Exeter Row and Tangita. We bait the Screamer Killer onto the low ground, and then position our units onto the high ground and do a bit of shuffling. You can see from the clips periodically Sho and his drones doing 2 hits, courtesy of the reworked Defender of the Greater Good. The other thing worth pointing out here is the drone behaviour. Clearly they prefer to be on the high ground, but from a positioning point of view, you can always see how they gravitate towards Shadowsun, even over the other command link drone. I don't know if that's because of how they are coded, or simply because they are seeking the highest damage buff, and as previously mentioned, the command link drone in this test build is giving out the wrong damage numbers at the moment. The final damage on this legendary 4 Screamer Killer boss is northward of 700,000, and I probably have some more positioning stuff that I can improve on. The skeptical among you will note that this is a fully Diamond 3 team and ask what other Diamond 3 meta character teams are doing, and that's a fair question. When I tried replicating my Ragnar and Ulf team on this Screamer Killer boss at Diamond 3, the damage potential was coming out at between 550 and 600,000 damage, so this team composition is significantly outperforming it. Clearly for this team, the majority of the damage is coming from Exeter Row, but I think it's still nice to see some potential guild raid positions where Shadowsun might be good. I think that from a guild raid prime perspective, the Necron primes are also attractive targets for the same setup. We've talked a lot about who Shadowsun will work well with within the Tau forces, but a quick nod to a couple of others. As you've just seen, Tangita is a nice option because the bonus 500 damage from her passive applies at range 2 as well as from herself. It is therefore much easier to apply to an existing army of summons, and things start to get out of hand with high ground and accompanying Eldryon buffs, especially considering that the toxic damage type from this Guittari Vanguard has a 70% pierce. It's worth briefly talking about Shadowsun against Rogal Dorn too. All of her traits are excellent against this boss. Movement 4, Infiltrate, Flying. This is everything that you would want to give a character in order to fight against the Rogal Dorn battle tank. The buff to Melta is appreciated both from an increased pierce ratio, but also a massive 50% damage boost against vehicles. You'll know by now that multipliers like this factor in at the end of the damage ladder, so you can add buffs like Eldryon and Aethana before multiplying it all by 150%. Exemplar of Cao Yan also lets you easily teleport for some rear hits, and has a secret buff against this boss in the fact that her drone with movement 0 cannot trigger Gunner's Kill on sight. Sadly, you're not really getting the most out of her abilities on this boss, as we have touched on previously with her passive. Still, if you're stuck and struggling on the Rogal Dorn, then Shadowsun is a reasonable stopgap to work through the troublesome boss mechanics. For earlier players, they might also appreciate the damage aura that her passive gives before they unlock Calgar. In player versus player, Shadowsun is now among the most hyper-mobile characters in the game. She flies, has a speed of 4 and has range 2, and that is all before we factor in her teleport ability from turn 2 onwards. As you'll see in this picture, the command link drone is now reasonably durable and can be used to protect a hex in conquest mode and secure points. The downsides are that her active still isn't targetable, which can make it slightly unreliable or more tricky to use, and the battles generally don't last long enough to get meaningful benefit from the bonus hit portion of her passive. What are my closing thoughts on Shadowsun before we move on to the orcs? I think that the movement buff is massive. Along with flying and teleport, Shadowsun really has a lot of flexibility now. The changes to Melta are pretty powerful, but I suspect they won't be just for her. I think we are seeing this in advance of more characters with Melta weapons being added to the game, and also in advance of more vehicles being added to the game too. Outside of the Tau, it looks like she will work well with ranged summons like Tangita or Anufet, but potentially also in a single hit meta with Vitruvius. I'm not totally sold on the latter, but I trust my source, Sheed Ranko, who's been doing a lot of creative testing and using Shadowsun even before she had her buff. The bonus hit part of her passive clearly benefits Sho the most, but it has limited applicability on bosses, and PvP battles generally don't last long enough. However, as I was sitting and writing the script for this video, I had a little smile of inner contentment. Cao Yan is the Tau doctrine that translates as Patient Hunter. You literally bide your time until the most opportune moment to strike, and that is the flavour behind the increasing potency of Shadowsun's passive as the turns go on. I wonder if there will ever be a Mont Ka archetype, also known as the Killing Blow. It is practiced by Commander Farsight, and I have included my own model on screen, which I got commissioned by Siege Studios. I think Farsight would be an excellent addition to Tau, either as a playable character model or as a boss in coming months. I think overall it's a good rework. I don't think Shadowsun is going to leap to the top of any meta charts anytime soon. However, she is now more usable in guild raids, has more flexibility in PvP, and opens up some interesting avenues for attack against vehicles, should they become a bigger part of the meta. The next thing we'll take a look at quickly is the Snotflogga rework. Snowprint have already promised that they will rework the entire orc faction, but they're just taking things slowly with one character at a time. Snotflogga has received a host of stat changes as seen on screen, with bonus health, less armor, and bonus damage. In-game, we can see the new character profile for Snotflogga as well. His stats are shown at screen on Diamond 3, but crucially, I want to take a look at his new ability, Get Stuck In. This will be an ability that will get carried forward to all of the future orcs as they come to the game. What it says is that for every 2 hits the unit does with an attack within ranged 2, it has a 30% chance to score an additional hit. However, if there are lots of orcs nearby, then the chance is increased to 100%. I've checked with the developers on this, and they have told me that for characters with 4 hits and above, this can mean multiple bonus hits on a single turn. For example, if a character has 6 hits and they meet this criteria, then they would get 3 bonus hits. Beast Slayer is the other trait and remains unchanged from pre-buff. We can next take a look at Snotflogga's active ability. Get 'em Runts has now changed, where it summons a grot. These grots now apply Taunted to any enemies that they attack. We'll remind ourselves that taunted units are forced to attack the taunting unit. They can't use their active, heal, repair, or attack another target. We can also take a look at Snotflogga's passive, Squig Hound. This lets grots ignore battle fatigue, gives an increased bonus to the physical damage whenever triggered, and whenever Snotflogga makes an attack, if there are fewer than 5 grots on the battlefield, he will summon an additional grot. This is just a quick clip demonstrating Snotflogga in action against the forces of the Tau Empire. You can see here that Snotflogga activates his active ability, and that summons 3 grots against the Tau. The grots attack fairly randomly, so 2 attack aun'shi and only 1 attacks Sho'Syl. So as a result, Darkstrider, Revas, and Shadowsun are not taunted, however aun'shi and Sho'Syl are. We can fast forward and cycle through to the next turn, and here you see that when Snotflogga makes an attack, we get an additional grot spawned through the passive ability, and we're now up to 5 grots on the battlefield as a result of the grot passive trait ability, which lets them self-multiply. Thanks to all of you for your continued support on this channel. As a small way of saying thank you and celebrating the subscriber milestone, Shadowsun Buffed will get you some free gold, Blackstone, and an epic badge to spend on any Xenos of your choice. It is only valid until March the 13th, so make sure you redeem it quickly. That's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I took a bit of a deeper dive on Shadowsun because this is something I've been asking for a long time, so I'm sorry the video is a little bit longer than usual. If you're a newer player who hasn't yet used their referral code, I would love if you could consider entering mine as shown on screen. It earns you 100 Blackstone and supports me in the work that I do. It is single use though, so choose who you support carefully. Let me know your thoughts on the character buffs in the comment section below. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!